Ma'am, before these proceedings commence, those decorations on your uniform, they will be removed. This is a courtroom, not a memorial parade. Judge Marcus Thorne's voice, amplified slightly by the courtroom microphone, sliced through the otherwise quiet chamber, cold and absolute as a new-honed blade. His gaze, like chips of flint, fixed on the chest of the elderly woman standing before the plaintiff's table. Colonel Eleanor Vance, United States Army, retired, 75 years of age, straightened her slightly stooped shoulders. Her silver-gray hair, thinned by time but neatly coiffed, framed a face etched with the map of a long, eventful life. She wore her old Army service uniform, the classic green, meticulously preserved, a testament to a bygone era of spit and polish. Pinned above her heart, just so, were 3 rows of ribbons, surmounted by a few carefully chosen medals, a Bronze Star, a Legion of Merit, a Defense Meritorious Service Medal. They were not a boast, but a quiet summary of a life dedicated to service. She was here, in the Monroe County Courthouse's Civil Division, for a mundane dispute with her overzealous homeowners association regarding the height of the flagpole from which she flew the American flag in her small front yard. A matter of principle, she told her granddaughter. Your Honor, Eleanor began, her voice surprisingly steady, though soft with age, am I in violation of any specific courtroom decorum or dress code by wearing these symbols of my federal service? She'd served for over 30 years, she knew a thing or two about regulations. Judge Thorne, a man in his mid-50s with a stern, unyielding face and a reputation for impatience, leaned forward. Colonel Vance, is it? In my courtroom, I determine decorum. And I find those trinkets distracting and inappropriate for a civil hearing. Remove them. Now. The gavel on his bench seemed to underscore the finality of his command. A low murmur rippled through the handful of people in the public gallery. Eleanor Vance wasn't accustomed to being dismissed as a distraction. Her life had been one of profound purpose, often lived in the very crucible where history was forged. She'd been one of the pioneering women to navigate the daunting, often hostile, male-dominated landscape of the U.S. Army in the latter half of the 20th century. Commissioned in the early 1970s, a time when opportunities for women were circumscribed, she'd carved out a distinguished career through sheer grit, intellect, and an unwavering commitment to her soldiers and her country. She'd served in Cold War listening posts in a divided Germany, managed complex logistical nightmares during humanitarian missions in ravaged countries, and held high-level staff positions at the Pentagon where her strategic acumen was highly valued. The medals Judge Thorne so contemptuously referred to as trinkets were silent witnesses to that journey. Her Bronze Star, for instance. It wasn't for charging a machine gun nest, she'd been an intelligence officer then, during Operation Desert Storm. It was awarded for meritorious service during a particularly chaotic period when Iraqi Scud missiles were falling on their forward operating base. While others scrambled for cover, then Major Vance had calmly remained at her post, coordinating critical intelligence flow that directly contributed to identifying and neutralizing several enemy missile launch sites, saving countless lives, both American and Allied. Her citation spoke of grace under pressure and exceptional analytical skill in a combat zone. The Legion of Merit, awarded upon her retirement as a full colonel, recognized a lifetime of such exceptionally meritorious conduct. It acknowledged her work in developing new training protocols for joint service intelligence sharing, a program that was later adopted Army-wide and significantly improved operational effectiveness. She'd mentored hundreds of young officers, men and women, many of whom had gone on to their own distinguished careers, often citing her leadership as their inspiration. These weren't baubles to Eleanor. Each ribbon, each piece of polished metal, was a repository of memory, of challenges met, of sacrifices made by her and by those she served alongside, of comrades lost. They were a tangible link to a life lived in service to ideals she held sacred: duty, honor, country. That was why she'd chosen to wear her uniform today. Not to curry favor or make a spectacle, but because she believed this attire, and the symbols it bore, represented the highest form of respect one could show when seeking justice in a court of law. It was a statement of her lifelong adherence to discipline, truth, and the rule of law, principles she assumed the court itself held equally dear. The HOA dispute, while minor in the grand scheme, touched upon her right to express her patriotism, a right she felt she had more than earned. Judge Thorne's face hardened at Eleanor's implicit questioning of his authority. "Colonel Vance," he said, his voice dripping with condescension, "your service, however notable you may believe it to be, does not grant you special privileges in this courtroom. We are not here to be regaled with tales of past glories or to be swayed by emotional displays." He made a dismissive gesture towards her medals. "This is a place for facts and law, unadorned. I will not ask you again. Remove them, or I will have the bailiff do it for you, and I assure you, you will not appreciate his methods." The threat, a clear abuse of his judicial power, hung heavy in the air. The court reporter's fingers stilled over her stenotype machine. The few lawyers present for other cases looked down, embarrassed or perhaps intimidated. Eleanor Vance stood a little straighter, the stoop in her shoulders seeming to lessen for a moment. The years of command, of facing down far more dangerous adversaries than an arrogant judge, resonated in her quiet composure. She met Judge Thorne's glare without flinching. Her voice, when she finally spoke, was low, but it carried the weight of decades and the clarity of unwavering conviction. "Your Honor," she said, each word measured, "these medals are not trinkets, nor are they an emotional display. They are symbols of an oath I took, an oath I upheld for over 30 years, often at great personal cost, to support and defend the Constitution of the United States, the very Constitution which, I presume, grants you the authority to sit on that bench." She paused, letting her words settle. "These medals were earned upholding principles of justice, liberty, and sacrifice, principles I had hoped would be understood and respected in this particular chamber. I have, in my time, faced down more formidable assertions of power than what you are displaying here today, Your Honor. But those, at least," her gaze was direct and unwavering, "were typically backed by enemy arms, not shielded by judicial robes." A gasp, quickly stifled, came from the public gallery. In the back row, a young woman, a law student interning with a local firm, had discreetly activated the video recorder on her smartphone, her eyes wide with disbelief at the unfolding drama. The image was stark, the elderly, decorated female colonel, radiating a quiet but immense dignity, and the imperious judge, his face now flushing with anger at her calm, devastating rebuke. The law student's less than 1-minute video clip, uploaded to a popular social media platform that afternoon with the simple caption, "75-year-old female war hero ordered to remove medals by Monroe County Judge Thorne. Her response is everything," was a spark dropped into a tinderbox. Within hours, it was a wildfire. The hashtag #StandWithColonelVance hashtag erupted. Veterans organizations, from the VFW and American Legion to newer groups focused on female veterans and military families, shared it with furious commentary. Active duty personnel, though officially constrained, found ways to express their support through likes and coded messages. Gold Star families, whose loved ones had made the ultimate sacrifice those medals represented, penned open letters demanding Judge Thorne's censure. By the next morning, the video had surpassed 5 million views. Morning news shows played the clip, their hosts expressing shock and admiration for Colonel Vance's composure. Cable news pundits debated judicial overreach and respect for military service. Pictures of Eleanor Vance, sourced from old Army archives or her small town's local historical society, began to circulate, a young, determined officer, a respected leader. The digital outrage quickly spilled into the physical world. Outside the Monroe County Courthouse, a small, then steadily growing, crowd of veterans began to gather. Some were in their old uniforms, others in civilian clothes adorned with service caps and pins. They didn't shout, they stood in silent, dignified protest, holding American flags and handmade signs, "Respect our heroes, medals are earned, not discarded, Judge Thorne, disgrace to the robe." Local businesses sent coffee and donuts. Passing cars honked in support. The story was no longer just about a courtroom incident, it was about a nation's deeply held values. Eleanor herself remained at her modest home, declining all interview requests. Her quiet dignity, in the face of this burgeoning national furor, only amplified the power of her stand. She hadn't sought this fight, but as always, she wouldn't shrink from a duty she felt was now thrust upon her, to ensure such disrespect wasn't an isolated incident or an unaddressed wrong. The sheer volume of public outrage was impossible for the authorities to ignore. The State Commission on Judicial Conduct announced it was inundated with over 10,000 formal complaints against Judge Marcus Thorne within 72 hours. An immediate investigation was launched. What the Commission, and soon, investigative journalists, began to uncover was deeply troubling. Judge Thorne's demand of Colonel Vance was not an isolated lapse in judgment, but rather the most visible manifestation of a disturbing pattern of behavior. Court transcripts from previous years were meticulously combed through. Long-dormant complaints, previously dismissed or ignored, were suddenly re-examined in a new, harsh light. Stories began to emerge. A young Marine veteran, struggling with PTSD and appearing before Judge Thorne in a custody battle, had his request for his service dog to be present summarily denied, with the judge reportedly scoffing, "This court doesn't accommodate emotional crutches." An elderly widow, attempting to probate her late husband's will, a decorated World War II veteran, had been sharply admonished by Thorne for becoming tearful while recounting their life together, telling her to compose herself or be found in contempt. There were instances of him making dismissive remarks about female lawyers he deemed too aggressive, or older litigants he considered slow-witted. A legal advocacy group specializing in veterans' rights quickly took up Colonel Vance's cause, offering pro bono representation. They began to compile a dossier on Judge Thorne, connecting with other individuals who had suffered his judicial temperament in silence. The narrative was shifting from a single, shocking incident to a portrait of a judge who seemed to harbor a particular disdain for perceived vulnerability or any display of identity that he couldn't control or didn't personally sanction within the four walls of his courtroom, especially if it came from veterans or the elderly. Eleanor, with the quiet resolve that had defined her career, agreed to cooperate fully with the Commission. Supported by a coalition of veterans organizations and civil rights groups, she filed a comprehensive formal complaint, detailing not only her own experience but also referencing the emerging pattern of bias that threatened the public's faith in Judge Thorne's impartiality. The State Commission on Judicial Conduct, facing immense public pressure and a growing mountain of evidence, moved with uncharacteristic speed. An emergency public hearing was convened to review the allegations against Judge Marcus Thorne. The hearing room was packed with press, veterans, and concerned citizens, while thousands more watched the live stream. Colonel Eleanor Vance was the first to testify. Calmly and precisely, she recounted the events of that Monday morning in Judge Thorne's courtroom. She spoke not of anger, but of a deep disappointment that a place of justice could be so readily defiled by personal arrogance. Her testimony, delivered with the same quiet dignity she had displayed under Thorne's verbal assault, was profoundly moving. But it was the testimonies that followed which truly sealed Judge Thorne's fate. Staff Sergeant Amelia Rodriguez, a combat medic who had served 2 tours in Afghanistan, her voice trembling but resolute, described how Judge Thorne had publicly berated her and denied a crucial continuance in a family court matter when she had presented her official National Guard deployment orders. He had allegedly remarked that her military adventurism shouldn't inconvenience his court schedule. Then came Mr. Arthur Kowalski, an 82-year-old retired factory worker, who tearfully recounted how Judge Thorne had mocked his hearing impairment and dismissed his legitimate small claims case against a predatory contractor with a flippant, "If you can't hear, you can't make a case." Each story added another layer to the undeniable pattern of judicial misconduct, of a man who wielded his gavel like a cudgel against those he deemed beneath his consideration. Judge Thorne, present at the hearing with his own counsel, sat stone-faced, occasionally scribbling notes, but his usual air of imperious command was noticeably absent, replaced by a defensive tension. The weight of the collective testimony was palpable. The Commission's deliberations were swift. Within days of the hearing's conclusion, their findings were released. Judge Marcus Thorne was found to have engaged in a pattern of conduct prejudicial to the administration of justice, demonstrating a clear lack of judicial temperament, and bringing his office into disrepute. They recommended his immediate suspension from the bench without pay, and the initiation of formal proceedings for his permanent removal. Judge Thorne, through his attorney, released a terse statement claiming he had been misunderstood, and that his actions were merely an attempt to maintain courtroom decorum. There was no apology to Colonel Vance, nor to the military community, nor to any of the other individuals his conduct had harmed. But it was far too little, far too late. His judicial career was, for all intents and purposes, over, his legacy irrevocably tarnished. For Eleanor Vance, the outcome was a somber vindication. Weeks later, in a ceremony at the state capitol, the governor publicly apologized to Colonel Vance on behalf of the citizens of the state for the disrespect she had endured. Before an applauding assembly of lawmakers, veterans, and community leaders, the governor presented Eleanor with the State Medal of Civic Valor, recognizing not only her lifetime of exemplary military service but also her extraordinary courage and unwavering dignity in confronting injustice within the very halls designed to uphold it. National veterans organizations also lauded her, establishing a new Colonel Eleanor Vance Award for Principled Stand. Colonel Vance never sought the spotlight or revenge, only the quiet affirmation of respect that every citizen, especially those who have served, deserves. The incident in Judge Thorne's courtroom, however, sparked a much-needed conversation about judicial accountability and the often unseen biases that can infect even our most sacred institutions. As a direct result, the state implemented mandatory veteran sensitivity and protocol training for all sitting judges and new judicial appointees. Eleanor Vance's quiet stand became a national symbol of resilience, a reminder that true courage isn't solely defined on the battlefield but also in the steadfast refusal to allow one's hard-earned dignity to be stripped away by arrogance or abuse of power. Comment below, have you ever witnessed someone stand up to injustice with quiet dignity? What does true honor mean to you, and how can we better ensure it's recognized in our daily lives? Let's show our respect for all veterans, like Colonel Vance, who have served with valor and continue to uphold their principles in the face of adversity. If Colonel Vance's story of courage and integrity inspired you, please like this video, share it to spread the message, and subscribe for more powerful tales of ordinary people doing extraordinary things.